Hello again. Today we're talking more about roots. In the last lesson, we just learned one root for each chord, and we talked about how it's important to think of that root as part of the chord shape. We'll talk more about that today, and we'll see more. Well, there's more than one place where you have a root, and we're going to see, I guess, beginning to take a glimpse at. There's a lot of cool things you can do if you know where your roots are. For one thing, it's going to help you find your way around the fretboard. A lot of us are, let's see, my age or older, and sometimes we have, stiffness or arthritis or injuries. And there's a lot of reasons why we might need to innovate and modify for ourselves. So this kind of knowledge, it's easier to develop this kind of knowledge of the patterns than it is to like physically play stuff. So having the knowledge can make it so that you can modify for yourself and innovate and play part of the chord. Maybe you don't want to play all 6 strings. So let's start by looking at the C shape. I want to remind you where these terms come from. Root, third, and fifth. Let's look at the C scale. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And here's your half steps. All the other ones are whole steps. If you take any scale, you take the first note, third note, fifth note, those notes are the spelling of the chords. So this is a C major scale. This is a C major chord, C, E, G. When we make the C shape on guitar, every string you hear ringing is either a C or an E or a G. And the note that has the same name as the first note of the scale is called the root or the 1. A lot of times it's called 1, 3, 5, or we call it the root, the third, and the fifth. I don't know why we usually don't say first. We just say root, third, fifth, or the 1, 3, 5. So right here, for example, on your C chord, that is a root. And this note here on the 4th string is an E, that's the 3rd. And the G is the 5th. Here, this spot on the 2nd string, 1st fret, that's a C. So you have a root there also. Right, where is it? Right there. You have a root there also. Now let's go right straight to the D chord. There's something really cool I want to show you with the D shape. So when we studied the D chord in the last lesson, we just learned one root. The 4th string open is a root, and we learned to look at it as part of the chord shape. You could even, let's see, where's our D? You could even put a black dot here to really see the shape. That's a good idea. I hadn't thought of that before. But this note here, right here, 2nd string, 3rd fret, that's a D. So guess what? So this is also a root. The really neat thing about knowing where this root is, here's one of the cool things about roots. The root names the chord. So all these movable shapes, and really, well, I won't get it. All shapes are movable, but there's a hitch. We take a shape like the D shape. If you were only playing, people don't always think of this as a movable shape, but it is. If you were just playing the first 3 strings, it's movable. If I go 2 frets higher, now I have an E chord. If I go 1 fret higher, that's an F chord. 2 frets higher is a G chord. And the reason this root is so helpful at helping you find your way around, so if you know that this shape has a root right here, okay, hold that thought. Remember when we talked about this a couple lessons ago, we talked about the shape of a scale on the guitar. And it's just like the alphabet. The E's and the F's are always right next to each other. They're a half step apart. And the B's and the C's are always right next to each other. They're a half step apart. So keeping that in mind, if we know this is a C, we know that's a D, and we know that's an E, and so forth. So when you're familiar with that shape and that information, you can take the knowledge of this shape, and you know this is the shape of a major chord. I'm just playing 3 strings. And you know that's the name of the chord. This is a D note, so here's a D chord. If I go 2 frets higher, this note names the chord. That's if this was a D, this was an E. That's an E chord. Okay, if this is a D, that's an E, and it's a half step to F. So that is an F chord. Now we're back to whole steps. F, whole step higher. This is a G chord. Whole step higher. That note names the chord. And this pattern, D, E, F, G, A, can help you find your way around. That's one big thing the roots can do, not just with the D shape, but this is particularly, these shapes are very useful when you're playing lead and when you want to play your relationships in a different place. We'll get more into that later. Okay, there's another really cool thing you can do with knowledge that this is your root. We call it root, but we mustn't forget it's also the 1. And let's look at this really quick so we don't get lost. Okay, so here's a C, and we're calling it 1. C, D, E, F, G, A, B is 7. And there's 1 again. So wherever you have 1, you have 7, just 1 fret lower. Okay? Back to our D shape. We know this is a 1, right? This is a root right here. This is a 1. So if I'm playing along and my song chart tells me D major 7, in order to make a major 7 chord, you take your root. I'm just going to use the root right now. Here's my root, and you make it 1 fret lower. So instead of this shape, you have this shape. Let's look at this really quick. Just imagine that dot moves to here. So you have 3 dots in a row, 2nd fret. That's D major 7. I'm playing the 4th string. It's really pretty. And then if you run into chord, it says D7, you may already know the D7 shape, but what that is let's see. Okay, in D, we take, if we wanted major 7, we go down 1 fret. If we want the D7 chord, what that really is, when we say D7, it really is D with a flatted 7th, but because the 7 chord, like D7, G7, C7, they're used so often, we just call it D7. But really what it is D flatted 7th. So if this is a D, this is the 7th, or you could call it a major 7th, and then this is a flatted 7th. So let's look at the shape again. So D chord, if you move the root here, you have D major 7, and if you another half step down, you have D7. That's true for every chord and every root. So let's listen to D, D major 7, D7. It's a pretty sound. And even though that one, like you've already been told, if you've been playing for a little while, what the D7 shape looks like, but now you know why. And you may have seen the D major 7, but someday you're going to run into a situation where you know the major chord shape and you want to turn it into a major seventh chord, or you want to create an easier way of making the chord shape than the one that was shown you in the book or something like that. Let me give you a couple more examples, and then we'll talk about one more important thing before we go. In your G shape, this is a G note. We learned that that's the root. Well, whatever your note is on the 6th string, that's the same note on the 1st string. So if this is a G, this is a G. So with our G chord, this spot here is also a root, okay? And if you know that, and if you want to make a G major 7th, you can play that note, and you may already be familiar with just regular. What I'm doing here actually is, well, I was muting the 5th string with this finger. Same thing here. So G major 7, regular old G7. Let's go ahead. Here's the other, one more really important thing about knowing where your roots are. And then I'll give you a little preview about the gateway chords. Let's just look at 2 shapes for now, what we call the C shape. And let's pretend you know really well, or you may already know really well, okay, this is my C shape, I'm familiar with that shape, this spot is the root. The thing about these shapes is wherever you move them, even if you don't really want to play them, they help you find your way around. Wherever you move this shape, that is still the root, and that's still the root. So if I know this is a C, then I know it's a D chord. Doesn't sound very good because of the open strings, but this is still a root, and this is still a root. Okay. Here's the reason why this is important. So here's your C shape, and here's a root. If you, and we want to kind of keep a presence of mind, this root is on the 5th string. Here's a shape. It's this shape. It's the A shape moved up higher with the root here. A lot of people play it like you'll bar. Oh, let's see. I'm going to bar here so it'll be a C chord. And you bar here and here. I like to play it with these 3 fingers. I usually don't bar it, but it's the A shape moved up to the 5th fret. And see where this finger is? That's a C note. This is the root of that shape. So if you know that this is a C, and you play this shape, and if you know that this is the root, you know, whoops, then you know that this is a C chord. I think another lesson for talking about why that is so important, but let me just give you another example. Some of you may know the D shape that you can play here. If I know that's a D, then I can play a different shape that has the root in the same place. And because I know that's my root, I know I'm playing a D chord. We could go on and on about this, but actually it's time for me to sign off and remind you to like and subscribe. And I'm going to put a link to the gateway chords, because in the gateway chord series, we get into where the 3rd is and where the 5th is, and we really get into magic at that point. So I will talk to you later, and thanks for being here. Bye. See you next time.